Hey, TheSmoothTerrorist here. This is a response to David McMurdo and his video Nationalism and Activism Part 2. Response to TheSmoothTerrorist and Inmendham. Now, part of your video, David McMurdo, was a response to a video by Inmendham, which I haven't seen, and which I have no intention of watching. But let me just fill you in on a few things, because you seem confused by the fact that Gary and I don't have a warm relationship. Let me just say that most of the animosity is on his part, not mine. I don't hate Inmendham. Frankly, I just find him kind of uninteresting. But he hates me. And I'm not going to go into the details of why that is, because that would make this into a drama video. But I'm just going to tell you this. It has to do with a woman. And I think that should tell the whole story by itself. I don't think I should have to give you the details. You see, you look like the kind of guy who knows what I'm talking about. It has to do with a woman. Should I really need to say more than that? Anyway. But I want to address a few things in your video, David McMurdo. One of them is that you're concerned about this project I'm doing and whether it's going to get off the ground. Well, you're not the only person who's expressed that concern. I've gotten a few PMs, including from that wish list person that I read. I read his communiques in a few of my videos before, and just like you, Wishlist said, "Oh, you better strike while the iron's hot, because this thing has momentum behind it right now, and if you wait too long, then you'll lose the momentum and people will lose interest, and you should just pick a forum right now, even if it's not perfect, and just strike while the iron's hot before you lose momentum." And look, I'm going to say the same thing to you that I said to him. I'm not concerned about losing momentum in the least. If anybody loses interest in participating in this project because it takes a few weeks, a few months, or hell, even a few years to get started, fuck them. They weren't dedicated enough to begin with, so I don't care. I don't care in the least. Now, I will let you know that the project isn't stalled out, not in the least. I've been speaking to a number of web developers who have kindly volunteered their services and are willing to create a forum for this. And right now I'm vetting options, and I'm deciding which is the best way to go. And you know, anybody who's interested in participating in this, all I can tell you is it's going to take how long it takes, guys. You know, and if you're impatient and you lose interest, then that's probably for the best. It's probably meant to be. I mean, if you know, this is not an undertaking that is conducive to short attention spans. I'll put it that way. If you don't really care, then please don't waste my time, and I won't waste yours. Now, another concern that David McMurdo expressed, and you're not the only one, once again, David, who's brought this up, is the possibility of trolls co-opting this and just derailing the project. Well, you know, I didn't think that was going to be a problem in the beginning. Now, here's the interesting thing about these anti-natalists, David McMurdo. What I find very interesting is that I've been making videos on YouTube for years, and Gary Inmendham has not paid any attention to me. He doesn't care what I'm here talking. He doesn't care what I'm doing. I do my thing, he does his thing. But all of a sudden, if he finds out that I'm trying to do something beneficial to the human species, oh boy, does that fucking chafe him raw. That just really sticks in his craw. And the rest of these anti-natalists too. Oh, that just riles them up. It pisses them off. And I don't know if you had a chance to see it, but I made a video essentially trolling these guys. I took it down after about 10 minutes. I decided, you know, I decided it was counterproductive. It's kind of the thing I used to do back in the day, and I said, yeah, do I really want to go back to making videos like that? No, not really. It's not worth it. But I do think that there is a real danger of this project being derailed by trolls, and I might have to make it invitation only. I might have to hand pick the people who participate, and that has occurred to me. Rest assured, David McMurdo, you've made the cut. And I really hope I don't have to do that, because I think it's going to be a big hindrance, but it may be necessary. I just think it's shameful that these anti-natalist guys have all come out of the woodwork to try and disrupt what I'm doing. Because I never made a video about philosophy. I never made a video refuting anti-natalism. So clearly they're just here to throw a monkey wrench in the works and try to prevent me from doing what I'm doing. And I find that reprehensible in the highest. I think it's disgusting. But David McMurdo, you know, I want to make sure that these people don't drag you down to their level. I want to make sure that they don't cause you to lose hope and cause you to just languish in despair and ennui the way they do. And it's for that reason that I'm going to refute anti-natalism. And I don't need to record a 3-hour-long video full of heady academic citations in order to do it. I can do it really quick and really easy. Now, you said, David McMurdo, that Inmendham said to you that because you believe in God, you believe in something which cannot be substantiated, and therefore your I can't remember what words he used. Your logic is suspect, or your rationale is suspect. Your judgment is suspect. Maybe that's what he said. You believe in something that cannot be substantiated, i.e. God, and therefore your judgment is suspect. Well, David McMurdo, let me let you in on a little secret. Gary Inmendham and all of his anti-natalist followers, they all believe in something which can't be substantiated too. And that is the premise that life sucks. There's no way to prove that. There is no objective way to measure suffering. And this is something that there was a psychologist by the name of Viktor Frankl, very highly influential psychologist, and he spent a lot of time in the Nazi concentration camps because he was a Jew. Now, if you were a Jew in the concentration camps, the likelihood was pretty high that, you know, any day your number could be up and you'd get herded into the ovens or the gas chamber. But the Nazis tended to make exceptions for Jewish people who had valuable skills, because they didn't want to do their own work. They didn't want to cook, they didn't want to clean, they didn't even want to do their own discipline. They would actually appoint abusers from among the Jewish concentration camp population to act as guards. I believe they called them capos. But Viktor Frankl was a very successful psychologist. Now, how do you define success for a psychologist? Because so much of psychology is theory, and so much of it is subjective. So how do you judge someone as successful objectively? Well, he had an incredible track record for preventing suicide. He was very good at reducing suicide rates, and I can't think of a better objective measure of success for a psychologist than that. So, Viktor Frankl was kept alive, and he managed to survive the war because he had a valuable skill. And unless, I could be wrong about this because I haven't read about him in so many years, but I'm pretty sure that not only was he treating the other inmates in the camp, and the camps actually, he was in several camps. I believe one of them was Auschwitz. But he was also treating the guards. So just imagine a Nazi laying down on the couch next to a Jewish psychologist and saying, "Oh, I had such a long day of herding your people into the ovens, and I feel a little bad about it. I'm a little upset." That happened. But Viktor Frankl was very influential on psychology because of the discoveries and observations that he made during his time in the camps. And the most important observation he made, he noticed after a while that he could see people smiling from time to time. That even though the other people in the camps were just like him, living in horrible conditions, not getting enough food to eat, being abused routinely by the guards, sleeping on wooden racks full of hay that were infested with lice, and they would give you typhus and all kinds of disease. These people were living in horrible conditions, and yet from time to time they would laugh, they would joke, and he could spot them just going about their day, having a good old time. And what Viktor Frankl figured out is that environment is not a very accurate predictor of happiness. That is to say, you could find somebody living in a swanky penthouse suite in Manhattan, completely miserable, drinking himself into a stupor by the afternoon, just a miserable person, a depressed person. And by the same turn, if you look hard enough, you could find a crippled, impoverished refugee living in Tanzania who greets every day with a smile and has a chipper attitude. And these anti-natalists think that they've cottoned on to a secret knowledge that the rest of us don't possess. That they think that those of us who are not anti-natalists are afraid to face a harsh truth, which they bravely face. You know, and I guess the existence of like Orthodox Calvinism doesn't dissuade them any, that it's possible for people to believe horrible things and yet still not be anti-natalists. But the truth is, they don't possess any secret knowledge. Their anti-natalism is just a way of telling the world that they're unhappy people. That's really all it comes down to. And I'd like to hold myself up as an example, okay? You know, I typically don't talk too much about my personal life on YouTube. I'm kind of a private person. And very public. It's a bit of a contradiction. But I don't give too much autobiographical data. Well, let me tell you a few things about myself, David McMurdo. I was routinely abused as a kid, beaten, tortured, frequently held at gunpoint. I've OD'd on drugs several times. I live in abject poverty. Well, you know, by American standards. I mean, here again, you know, just by virtue of the fact that I live in this country, I'm a lot more privileged than some people in the world. But there are many people who would consider that my life is a living hell. And they would think that, just like the Jews in the concentration camps, I'm living in horrible conditions. They would think that. Yet, I greet every day with a smile, David McMurdo. I have friends. I have people who care about me. I have people who I care about. I have causes that give my life meaning. And at the end of the day, I'm a happy person. I think that's really what pisses anti-natalists off the most, is the idea that some people are capable of not moping around and just bemoaning what a meaningless horror show it all is. And you know, the funniest part is, I share probably 99% of their belief system. I mean, I think the average anti-natalist is probably a materialist. So am I. I am a stark materialist. I don't believe in souls. I don't believe in free will. I think free will is a ridiculous concept. I'm a strict causal determinist. I believe we live in a clockwork universe. Everything's predetermined. You know, I think that at bottom, human beings are machines, complex biochemical machines, obeying our genetic programming, executing programming, and I'm okay with that. Now, the anti-natalist says that life has no value, that there's no reason for us to be here. We may as well not exist. But, you know, if you view reality the way I do, and I consider that the difference between organic and inorganic matter, between life and non-life, is really a little bit more arbitrary than most people think. Let me give you a little example. I was watching a documentary once about a cave which was discovered in a silver mine in Mexico. And these giant gypsum crystals were discovered inside this cave, which had previously been full of hot water because of volcanic activity in this silver mine. And these gypsum crystals were enormous. They were about the size of telephone poles. Hundreds of them. Now, they sent a team of scientists in with special equipment because the temperatures were so high, for all sorts of purposes, measuring all different aspects of this cave. But one specific discipline was exobiology. These exobiologists were there to try to find life, to try to find exotic, rare forms of life that couldn't be found anywhere else. And they left disappointed. They left with hangdog expressions on their face. Oh, there just wasn't any life in the cave. I remember watching that and thinking, what about the crystals? They grow, they reproduce. One of my favorite philosophers, a gentleman by the name of Guy Murchie, remarked upon the idea that perhaps it isn't the search for extraterrestrial life, but the search for non-life, which might yield the most surprising new information. And it really is more of an arbitrary distinction than it looks at first glance. I mean, how do you classify something like a virus? Is it alive? Is it not alive? What about a prion? Are prions alive? You know, the lines do blur. But if you have my view, if you see life as something which essentially isn't that special, it isn't really that distinct from inorganic matter, then you have to ask yourself this question: is self-pity an intrinsic feature of nature? Do you see a rock that feels sorry for itself? Do you see glaciers that want to commit suicide? It's you know, at the end of the day, we could argue this for days, but at the end of the day, what it really comes down to is anti-natalists are sissy boys who need to buck up. And that's all I can say about them. And David McMurdo, there is nothing wrong, nothing at all wrong with the fact that you find meaning in life by doing things to help other people and make the world that you live in a better place. There's nothing that I can think of more noble than that. And the only reason I'm talking about this stuff is that I don't want these guys to change you. I don't want these guys to drag you down to their level, and that is what they're trying to do. Misery loves company. These guys want to make converts to justify how rotten they feel. Because if they see anybody who thinks that life is worthwhile, it threatens their confidence that they're right, and it forces them to ask themselves if maybe they're just some whiny, mopey bitches, which they are. And that's why they won't be happy until every last person believes the same thing they do, which is never going to happen because it's an insane philosophy. They really are a death cult at bottom. So that's all I wanted to say to you, David McMurdo, on the topic of anti-natalism. By the way, your new apartment looks great. Congratulations. I know that your hard work feels satisfying, doesn't it? Wouldn't you say that simple work is good for the soul, David? Wouldn't you say that gives meaning to life. But some people wouldn't know anything about that. Now, you know, there's another little autobiographical fact that I'd like to divulge. I exist because of the bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I can't state that with 100% certainty. But here's what I do know. My grandfather, as I've mentioned in previous videos, served in the European theater. He prowled the Straßes of Germany with a gun waxing Nazis, and then he came home. But what I've never mentioned on YouTube before is that he was ordered back to the Pacific Theater of Operations. And I don't remember the specifics of his orders, but I do know that the fighting was still pretty hot. And when the bombs were used, those orders were rescinded. And he was allowed to stay in the United States and go to college. Now, had he been deployed to the Pacific Theater, would he have died? Maybe, and maybe not. He might have been just fine. But if he had died, there's one thing that's for certain. He wouldn't have been able to conceive my mother, and she wouldn't have been able to conceive me. So it's quite possible that the reason I exist is that thousands of Japanese lives were vaporized. That's something I found out at a young age, and I've thought about it my entire life. And, you know, somebody like Inmendham, David McMurdo, would say that there's no purpose for existence. But you, like myself, seem to be someone who is concerned with finding a purpose. Now, I don't know what yours is, and it's not my place to tell you that. But I do know that if my life has a purpose, I think it's to undo the sin that's responsible for my birth. And I may die without succeeding, but I will die trying. I will die trying. This has been The Smooth Terrorist, and if you enjoyed this video, then download it, re-upload it, mirror it, parody it, make it your own, because the anti-natalists at Google cannot censor me unless you let them. Keep it smooth.